I revisit Freaks and Geeks at least once a year. I also saw the entire run, the episodes that were aired at least, when they originally aired on TV. And together, we watched our young cast grow. Seth Rogen, Linda Cardellini, Guilfoyle, John Francis Daly, He Who Shall Not Be Named, Sam Levine, and Busy Phillips. And every year upon reviewing, I can't help but get that same pit in my stomach when the final episode approaches. I try to avoid watching it, I really do, but then it lingers in my mind, and I start to, get visits from apparitions at night. Apparitions of the out-of-nowhere 40-year-old high school student variety. Some TV shows last forever. Others live on in the TV wasteland. I just can't help but think that Freaks and Geeks has one of the most flawed finales of all time. Now, although it's not necessarily one of the worst, I agree with that. In order for me to get my point across about the supposed flawed finale, I guess we should start a bit earlier on. In the episode preceding our finale, The Little Things, Ken deals with his girlfriend being intersex, and Sam deals with his girlfriend, a girl he chased for a while, as you all recall, being a boring bitch. And also the Vice President Bush visits McKinley High, and Lindsay is forced to speak at the event. And that's pretty much the episode before our big finale. Oh yeah, and Ben Stiller's in this episode. He plays a neurotic Secret Service guy, and has a little part where he kind of blacklists Mr. Rosso, I guess, about his activist past, and then he breaks down when he decides to take advantage of having, the guidance counselor at his disposal. It's pretty funny.
Sometimes I have to just stand in one place for 12 hours and stare at a wall. You start to see things.
Luckily in this episode, Nick is kind of sidelined, and Ken decides to stay with his girlfriend, and Sam decides to leave his. And in the end, we kind of see Lindsay's rebellious spirit as she rejects the pre-written question. And, this is a classic episode. It has a little bit of everything, but it all leads up to our flawed finale. All in all, not a bad episode, though, and, I just feel like they're having a little trouble keeping all parties involved here. But anyways, this kind of awkwardly leads into our finale, Discos and Dragons. Again, we get a Nick storyline who has seemingly been getting into disco. Sarah is here, played by Lizzie Kaplan, who we saw earlier in the series. Here the storyline is that they're gearing up for a disco dance contest, or whatever. The episode starts off with the freaks blasting the lamos at the local disco when they discovered Nick's secret. Then, cue the last time we will see this awesome intro. Immediately, we see Sam at odds with being a geek, something I'm glad comes back around directly. Another trope from earlier on in the series that returns is Daniel's troubles at schools. We see him kind of plotting to cheat on a test. When Daniel's plan fails, he does what anybody does when they don't study for tests. Attempts to pull the fire alarm. And his punishment is, ironically, to join the AV club with the geeks. This leads to him being embarrassed, and in turn, embarrassing the gape-mouthed Kim. And we saw the pressure put on Lindsay in the last episode, and we see it again here. And she's basically forced to go on this academic trip. And to coax her into it and help her relax, Mr. Rosso lends her a Grateful Dead album, after using a quote for therapy, of course. There's also a weird attraction thing between Lindsay and Mr. Rosso, but we'll come back to that later. Ew. Lindsay then runs into McKinley High's two 40-year-old deadhead students that we have never seen before in the series. And they are just horrible. The series is kind of turning Lindsay into a deadhead in the 11th hour here. Shit. And, it turns Nick into a disco enthusiast. Although, with Nick, I kind of think he's just trying anything, as he too was always just horrible. If I'm being honest, the Lindsay deadhead transition is kind of cool. I mean, Box of Rain is a jam. And we gotta remember, these are essentially dumb kids. Lindsay then is immediately all chill, man, and then gets into it with her dad over dinner. Joe Flaherty, I gotta say, underrated TV dad. Lindsay then starts hanging out with the 40-year-old high school deadhead students that appeared from out of nowhere during lunch. And then they hype up the Grateful Dead, kind of like they hype up how great they are live and whatnot, and they invite Lindsay to join them as they plan to follow the Grateful Dead on tour that summer. It is nice to see the relationship between Daniel and Kim come to a head finally, as again, their problems kind of recurred here. As they do, the Geeks meanwhile are gearing up for a D&D game when Sam lets it be known how lame he thinks this shit is all getting. As he's getting older and such, I don't know. And the rest of his other friends kind of don't agree with them, and you kind of see them growing apart for the first time in the whole series, really. And after Kim and Daniel argue, she gets into it with Lindsay, as she resents her because Kim can't leave town this summer, not without anyone's help, of course. She can't do shit on her own. So, as she can't leave town or whatever this summer due to, her gaped mouthness, I guess, and she just, Kim is really a bitch here. She puts all of this on Lindsay, like makes it Lindsay's fault. Man, what a bitch. And the Geeks decide to have Daniel join them for a D&D session, which is just hilarious. I wish the dynamic was presented earlier on because it's great. Oh yeah, the disco subplot is still going on. They find out Nick is still hung up on Lindsay or something, and it's really kind of whatever. Back to the D&D Daniel Lacerio stuff. Daniel is Carlos the Dwarf in this campaign. Oh, and check out their love for Fago. And, I guess this last little scene with Nick and Lindsay is kind of cute. He admits to moving on, and he stopped smoking weed and whatnot, hence the disco. And we get the sense that the feelings are definitely still there between the two. But Nick still has to go through the ruse, so to speak. So, Nick always was an idiot. I don't know. This dance kind of acts as his dipshit defiance or something, I guess. And then he gets upstaged by a disco magician. To be honest, too much time is spent on this disco stuff. It really feels out of place in this show, especially this late in the series. There was even a little D&D disco montage. Hence the title, I guess, Discos and Dragons. Meanwhile, Daniel really takes to the game and to the Geeks. We then see that Lindsay gave in and gets on the bus to her academic summit, and she's seen off by her family, and it's a nice little scene. Then the bus stops, and she joins the 40-year-old deadhead students that appeared from out of nowhere to follow the Grateful Dead, lying to her parents' faces. She even tells her mom that she'll see her soon, knowing that she'll be gone for an open-ended amount of time. Then they pick up Kim's broke ass along the way. Nice. And sadly, this episode would be the abrupt finale of the series that ended far, far too soon. Before getting into why exactly I feel this is an overall flawed finale, well, let's get into why the show didn't last in the first place. Essentially, you can blame it on studio interference. You see, they were basically left to do what they wanted to do with this show, as it was a spec script from Paul Feig, who found himself getting into production pretty quick thanks to Judd Apatow and DreamWorks. But when the show didn't get the ratings desired, well, the studio would lend ideas that just didn't fit. No, not at all. And, why didn't it get ratings, even though it was a critical darling? Who knows? But basically, the network moved it around sporadically and took weeks off without notice, so you would see episodes out of order, and it was just all so strange. I remember this happening, and the nail in the coffin came when they pit the show against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So after a strong start, they found themselves potentially facing cancellation. Like, it was pretty obvious they were gonna get canceled. And no second season, So in haste, they found a way to wrap it all up. Sort of. I just don't think the overall ending for some of these characters was worth it. Nick, even though he sucks, kind of just felt forced here. And after the big drama storyline we got from Ken just before the finale, well, he seems sidelined pretty bad here, honestly. And I don't know, the deadhead thing? I just don't buy it. Yeah, the 40-year-old high school students who appeared out of goddamn nowhere, that was jarring. And with no mention, from what I can remember, of the Grateful Dead ever in this whole series, I don't know, who gives a shit, really? And I'm pretty sure these dudes would have all, ragged on the Grateful Dead, right? I mean, wouldn't they think that was lame? I do like the dynamic of Daniel and the Geeks and AV Club. Maybe that would have made for a good spin-off or something. But honestly, that too is just a little weird for a finale. Not just the Grateful Dead or, the sudden stint in AV Club, but the fact that those things seem to really just happen out of nowhere. I think a more grounded episode would have worked as the finale here. As this one just kind of seems forced all around. And yeah, I guess it was. And I'm sure if they had time and whatnot, we would have got a better send-off. As the finale, so to speak, makes for a good season finale in all respects. Just not a series finale. If there was a season 2, where, Daniel's now friends with the Geeks. Lindsay and Kim are back in trouble, because they came back from their trip. And the rest of the characters, well, I don't know. They wouldn't feel so sidelined if we saw them again, I don't know. Over time, Paul Feig and company have spoken on what would have eventually happened to our good friends. In a 2012 interview with Vanity Fair, Paul Feig detailed what would have happened to the characters if the show had continued. Lindsay would become a human rights lawyer years after the Grateful Dead thing. Sam would have joined the drama club. Neil would cope with his parents' divorce by joining a swing choir in school. Bill would join the basketball team, becoming a jock and leading to tension with the Geeks. Daniel would end up in jail, and Kim would become pregnant on tour while following the Grateful Dead. And Nick would be pressured into joining the army by his strict father. That would have been a great season too. And even, I would like to see some reunion series or something, I guess. Why not? Also, there was this book that was released entitled The Full Scripts back in the day. And in that book, they alluded to some darker storylines, which included Kim beating up her dad. Alan's brother gets killed in a hunting accident. Kim gets an abortion. The state starts busing in black students, and Kim gets arrested for stealing a car. Nick gets Lindsay pregnant. Kim is raped by her father. A student accuses Mr. Rosso of molesting her, which alludes back to that weird Mr. Rosso-Lindsay kind of weird vibes we got in that one episode. Strange. Daniel screws the quarterback's girlfriend, and an Estes rocket explodes and hurts the Geeks. Nick tries to kill himself, go figure. Bill wants to prove himself and starts to vandalize the school. Daniel brings a gun to school to scare a teacher. The freaks get into a huge car accident. Lindsay takes heroin. Bill stabs one of his mom's boyfriends. Neil burns down his house, and Cindy gets pregnant. God damn. They were really going for a darker tone there. And after the show's abrupt cancellation, well, we all know what happened to our cast and crew. They basically took over Hollywood for a while there. And as for Freaks and Geeks, well, a pseudo-spiritual sequel, not really though, was produced for MTV entitled Undeclared, which I'll be touching on soon. Hit that notification bell. And while the Freaks and Geeks finale isn't one of the worst TV finales of all time by any means, I just find it uneventful, forced, unnecessary, depressing, flawed. What do you think of the canceled two-short series Freaks and Geeks? Do you agree that it indeed had a flawed finale? Are you a 40-year-old high school student that appeared out of nowhere? Let me know in the comments, and let me know what other short-lived or poorly ended TV shows to cover next. Oh, hey, look at that. I talked about the teen football hit Varsity Blues, and it didn't get that many views. So, go check that one. Go check that one out right now. Please check that one out right now. Some TV shows last forever. Others live on in the TV wasteland.